planetary magic. A lot of people ask about it and want to do it somehow. Well, I'm going to try to explain it in the most simple way possible that's easy to understand and stuff, but we're going to get right into it. We're not going to waste any time. If you want to just know how to use practical application and how to do the sigils, I'll put somewhere here where to just skip, so you don't gotta listen to me talk. But if you are more on the academic side and you want to actually learn how this stuff works and how it operates, continue with me, please. Well, it is rooted in Babylonian and Chaldean astrology, going back centuries and centuries and centuries ago. It was refined through Greek Hermeticism, specifically the Corpus Hermeticum, or things like that, so it keeps it, they refined it later on, so it became more of a structure, if that makes sense. So it was also like in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, then it became more systemized, like Cornelius Agrippa with the 3 books of occult philosophy, as well as Solomonic grimoires and things like that, like the Greater Key of Solomon. The Greater Key of Solomon is actually a very good book when you want to get like things like colors correct and all different types of things like that. I'm a very academic type person. I always encourage to do your research through books, not just the internet. Go to the direct source of it. The Solomonic grimoire specifically does have things like planetary hours, spirits, and things like that. It's very important to understand planetary hours and how they work, because when you're working with planetary spirits, you need to have specific hours in the day, and I will get into that. So each day of the week is governed by a certain planet. So for example, Sunday being ruling about the sun, Monday being the moon, Tuesday being Mars, Wednesday being Mercury, and so on and so on. I will in another video get more in depth as to how to get your planetary hours more accurate. If you don't, there's apps that you can use. I'll try to get them linked down below if I can find them, that tell you directly what it is. If you want to be old school, you basically just gonna have to count the hours of the day, because depending on where you're at, like for example, I'm in Poland, right? And the days right now are a bit longer or shorter, obviously depending on what time of year it is, right? The planetary hours and days or whatever, the days are the same, but the planetary hours will be different depending on where you are. So you can't just be like, oh, well, it says it here in the grimoire or whatever. No, you gotta actually have your location's direct planetary hours and day. You can't just do a universal one. It don't work that way. But no matter what, it'll always go in a certain order, First will always be Saturn, then Jupiter, then Mars, then Sun, then so on and so on and so on. It goes on in a cycle, and I'll put it down here so you guys can see the full cycle. But no matter what, it'll always go in this cycle. It just is different depending on what hour of the day. Sometimes it's only 7 hours of sunlight a day. Sometimes there's more, sometimes there's less. It just really depends on where you are. So today I'm going to actually show you how to make these planetary sigils. Now, you can literally draw them, out the spirit force of the planet using their like numeric squares, like the magic circuit board and things like that. But we're going to try to keep this simple. Today I'm going to show you the, a method that has made this more simple for typical chaos magicians or just people simply trying to manifest things. Now, I'm not going to do this because I'm trying to work with people who are just beginners and don't have a deep knowledge of these things yet, at least. But you could often do actual full-blown rituals, right? Which I wouldn't recommend right now, because oftentimes what'll happen is that spirits, if you're not spiritually grounded, they'll just force shadow work. They'll try to force, like, especially Venus typically makes people very emotional. Even me, Venus will make people very emotional. Mars can trigger a lot of aggression. If you're not spiritually grounded and you do a full-blown ritual, you're actually inviting the spirit within your home. There's certain spirits that govern each planet and each thing, and just how you need a more general knowledge when you go into more ceremonial, more structured rituals with this. But for this, we're going to be simple. We're going to draw the sigil. We're going to get your intent, your goal, and then you're going to charge the sigil. Why the hell does it work? You know, y'all are probably thinking the same thing. Well, it's not like you're just like praying or whatever to a freaking rock in the sky. You know, it's not just that, right? It actually works through, you're actually aligning your mind and your ritual with ancient energetic forces, you know, archetypes and things like that, that actually shape reality. It's spiritual physics, basically. When you're utilizing your mind, you know, and things like that, you're essentially creating a Wi-Fi signal with this being, with this spirit, whether it's you see it as just an archetype, an extension of your psyche, and things like that. But you're creating a Wi-Fi signal, and when you do this, you're actually getting in tune with the frequency and the power within that planet's archetype in itself. Now, a couple things that I wanted to explain. Timing is everything in this type of situation. Some people will say, "Oh, do it whenever." I don't recommend that. I think it's important that if you want help from Venus, you need to do it on Friday on Venus hour, right? It really helps. Drawing the sigil and charging the sigil within that hour makes it way, way, way more powerful. Way, way, way more powerful. The intent, the drawing of it all, and even having not a super huge knowledge of basic numerology, numerical magic, whatever. Just like having an understanding of which numbers. Like, for example, here's some numbers that I would recommend, like the number 3. If you're in a situation, let's say you're working with Venus and you want to improve your relationship, oftentimes relationships are dealing with the number 2, polarity, right? The principle of polarity, right? You and your partner probably don't have a rhythm where you guys need a mediator, right? When people go to couples therapy, it's because they want a number 3, right? I often will use the number 3 when I'm working with Venus. If I want to improve a relationship or help somebody else, I will use the number 3 because it allows them to retain some sort of balance, some sort of mediator, some sort of vessel that allows them to create more balance within the relationship. If I want more things like very divine, right? Number 10, the 10 commandments, things like that. It all correlates into itself. Number 4 is one I use a lot. Number 7, spiritual completion. That's often meaning spiritual completion, right? It's all cross-reference. Like if you read the Holy Bible, specifically like Revelation, the 7 seals, the 7, all these things, number 7 is usually used in an aspect of divine, something divine, you know. So, but as for now, if you're gonna work with, if you need balance in your life, try number 3. If you need to work with all 4 elements and things like that, use the number 4. But as of right now, I would say work with number 7 and the number 3. Oftentimes, a lot of people need balance anyways, you know. So I would recommend those 2 numbers. So I would say number 3 and number 7 are good ones to work with. Now, I know that when I start to show this stuff, it's going to look a little bit more complex. It's going to be intimidating at first, but the method that I'm using is going to skip the really hard part where you have to translate the word you're saying from English to Hebrew to get the numerical value of those words and then plot the points. No, we're going to just use the English method for now because I'm assuming a lot of y'all speak English if you're listening to me. And it just goes simple as this. Number 1 is A, number 2 is B, so on and so on and so on. It becomes easy once you get this. All right, y'all, look at everything I got here. So I have a ruler, preferably one that has this round shape so you can draw the circle. It really helps for that. And also, of course, you know, plotting your numbers and things like that. So the reason why I have this book, you do not need this. I just use this. Sorry if it gets a little shaky. You do not need this. It helps obviously for more information, but I use it for the planetary squares. You can find these online, but I don't know why I would use online when I have a book here for it. So basically, right, each planet, right, Let me go to it real quick. So each planet has a square, right? And you do need these numbers. Ignore the Hebrew. This is not the method that we're going to be using. We're not going to be translating it to Hebrew right now. We're going to be using the Khmer method, the English Khmer method. Agrippa usually makes it this way, but I'm going to make this simple, right? So each planet has its own squares. So today you have Mars, you have Jupiter. So today we're going to work with Venus. I'm using Venus. Now, I already drew out these squares. If you want to make things quicker, you can print them out. It does not matter. I personally do it by hand because I don't have a printer right now. But yeah, anyways. So the way it works is that I have my planetary square here for Venus, right? So you do not need to, you can ignore all this, and it looks very intimidating. And I understand that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna close this book. I just wanted to show you guys what these squares and where they come from. This is from Cornelius Agrippa. So you're going to need these squares one way or another, but each planet has its own squares and its own color. So if you're going to use Venus, you need to use the Venus square, if that makes sense. If you're going to do Mars, you need the Mars square. If you're going to do Jupiter, you need the Jupiter square, so on and so on. Each square, some squares are shorter, some squares are longer, but I'll get into it later on why some of them are shorter and why longer. So basically, I'm gonna close this, right? You guys get the point, right? So now I have my, okay, so apologize for any shaking. So I have my numbers here. So to make it like pretty clean and understanding, basically each number has, each word has its own numerical value, excuse me, each letter, right? So y'all are gonna need to, if it helps you, but it's pretty obvious. 1 is A, 2 is B, and so on and so on and so on. So Z will be 26, and 9 will be I, so on, so on, so on, right? So the way you do this, right, is you remove all vowels first, right? So you won't need the, okay, so now I've zoomed in a little bit so you guys can see it better. So now all you gotta do is plot your points. So it's better to use a ruler, of course. So another thing is each planet has its own color, right? So I'm going to be using green because green is the color for Venus, right? So keep that in mind, right? You can easily look this up on the internet, ChatGPT, whatever you want, but I'm gonna go into more detail on it later, right? So basically, right, so now all I gotta do is I go from 23, right? So 23 to 14. So you find 23 here, and then you find 14. Where's 14? Here we go, right? So now I have 23 and 14. Right, and it doesn't need to be super perfect, y'all. Don't be overly complicated. It's more about your intent, right? So now I have 23 to 14, right? It's better to do it in pencil, honestly, but I wanted you guys to see the numbers, you know, that way you can clearly see what you're drawing, right? So then you go from 14 to 20. Now, if you write a really long thing, it's going to be much more complex, but I wanted to make this nice and easy for y'all. All right, so now we're doing 22. We went from 23 to 14 to 20, and now we are gonna go from 20 to 2, right? So where's 2? Okay, there we go. From 20 to 2. So I went from 20 to 2, and then now all that's left is from 2 to 25. That's simple, right? So I'm gonna do it this way, 2 to 25. Boom, there you go, there's your sigil, right? So now all I gotta do here is copy down what I just did, essentially. Now, again, this doesn't have to be perfect. You just need to get the gist. So the planetary spirit, it's basically creating that Wi-Fi signal with the planetary spirit.
There we go. And then see, I already jacked up, but it's okay. Like, it's not that deep. There we go. All right, so there is my sigil. Sorry for the bumping, right? So now that you have your sigil, now you can utilize whatever numerical things you want. So for example, 4, we're gonna use some simple stuff. So 7, meaning spiritual completion. Usually what I do is I go right in the center. I try to put in the center the symbol for Venus. So this is Venus's symbol, nice and feminine, right? So now what I usually want to do is, now I just put certain things. So like I'll put my name, I'll write my name, but you can get creative with it. You know, just try to get a knowledge of certain things. So I try to put, you know, my name in, you know, kind of make it look like that. And then maybe I'll put, but I try not to be too crazy, you know, because then it looks weird. But anyways, you guys get the point. And then let's say that I want to break the cycle. Let's say I want to break the cycle of me not thinking I'm pretty, right? So I'm gonna do a circle here. This is a cycle here, right? Simple, right? You get all artsy with it. You know, a lot of y'all ladies or whoever, sometimes you guys just want to do some art. It helps. It's kind of therapeutic when you think about it. So basically I try to have it all connected in some shape or form. You don't have to do this. Just do whatever you want to do. Basically, it's chaos, right? Sorry again for it being shaky. So now this is essentially my sigil, right? I use numerology, right? You don't need to do this. Well, I would prefer you do it, but I use the number 7 a lot because number 7 means spiritual completion, right? So I'll use and put number 7 here. So I will use the number 3. Let's say you're lacking balance in your life. So you have a lot of polarity, you know, you're dealing with a partner that's saying this and you're dealing with this and you need a middle ground. Well, then I'll use 3 and then I'll put 3s wherever I feel like it. So we're just gonna stop there, right? So now that you have your sigil, you can do what you need to do with it, right? So
now, because this method is a little bit more chaotic, I'm gonna give you guys more simple ways to charge it. Like, one way that you could oftentimes charge it is by simply meditating with it. Stare at the sigil, light a few candles, putting a lot of thought into the sigil within itself. A really popular one is putting the sigil under your pillow and seeing if it gives you any dreams. Now remember, spirits speak in symbols. So oftentimes you're not gonna get a dream where it's be like, oh, do this, do that, and also, oh, do this. This is why you're jacked up, because X, Y, Z. Like, it's not gonna do that, right? So dreams may occur. Simple way to do it, which I would recommend if you're just trying to be more simple about it, is just simply sitting with the sigil and focusing on your goal. And when you reach an emotional peak with this sigil, you're really thinking about it and you're like, I really, really want beauty. I really, really want beauty. Why do I want beauty? This and this and that. When you release emotions into it, release those emotions into the sigil. Think about the sigil, think about it, put it all in this stuff. And then what I recommend you do after you've charged the sigil is either put it in a journal like I do. I put it in a journal and then I record the results later on. That's how I know, you know, scientifically that it worked, or if it didn't work, whatever. Or you can burn it and forget about it. When you want to charge the sigil, I always recommend, again, I emphasize that you do it on the hour and the day of this planet. So Venus day, Venus hour. Jupiter day, Jupiter hour. It's Monday, day of the moon. Moon day, moon hour. So you get the full frequency of the planetary force, if that makes sense. It's important. I promise you it works. You know, you might have some interesting things happen, I promise, you know, but I also promise you're not gonna get possessed, you know, and things like that. It's simple chaos magic. You know, any questions below, please ask. If you want to roast me in the bottom, call me a heretic, call me an occultist, call me whatever you call me, do it, please, please. I'll respond nicely to you and things like that. But and also, if you do try this stuff, please, please tell me. Like, tell me what happened. Tell me what kind of things happened. Tell me about your dreams. You know, at the end of the day, I want to know how other people's experiences. I've done this for other people, and it has worked. I have done it for myself multiple times, and it works. Whether whatever reason you think it happened, it really doesn't matter. The stuff works. And as I always say, you know, the truth is always in the middle. And that's all. See you guys later.